Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention? The final luncheon of West 2023 will begin in about 5 minutes. At this time, if you could please mute your electronic devices, and we'll get started shortly. Thank you.
Protecting what matters most is the mission that matters most. At Lockheed Martin, we know today's battlefront is behind, above, and below. So no matter where the threat comes from, we make sure you stay ahead of it. Out here, we understand that every piece of the all-domain puzzle must fit together perfectly so that you can defend our shared values and own the contested battle space. That's why we've spent decades building and connecting the platforms you need to dominate every domain across air, land, sea, space, and cyber. We've created technologies that unite disparate and complex systems so you can sense, make sense, and act, protecting in the same moment you detect. And to safeguard that advantage, we're integrating digital engineering, AI, and 5G technology into the field and within our own walls. Everything we do is in service of what you do and why you do it. Your mission is a safer, more secure world. Our promise is to help make it happen by connecting the software to the hardware to everywhere, ensuring those we serve always stay ahead of ready.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's Keynote Luncheon. If you could please move to your seats. Please remember, at the conclusion of today's session, please provide feedback in the survey located within the app. You can provide feedback on any individual session or on the conference overall, and we will absolutely use your comments as we plan for 2024. As we begin today's lunch, AFCEA and the U.S. Naval Institute would like to recognize the industry partners who have generously sustained this event as sponsors and exhibitors. Without their support, events like this cannot happen. Please consult the app or the website for the full list. This keynote lunch is sponsored by Lockheed Martin, represented today by Chauncey McIntosh, Vice President and General Manager of Integrated Warfare Systems and Sensors. Please join me in a round of applause for Lockheed Martin and all of our patrons and sponsors. Now, please welcome to the stage Chaplain Keith Ellison, Deputy Command Chaplain, Naval Base San Diego, who will deliver today's invocation.
Good morning. This will only take 30 minutes. Let us pray. God, we're grateful for being able to gather here another year. We're grateful for life and health and strength. We ask that you continue to guide us and bless all of the airmen, the soldiers, the Marines, the Coast Guardsmen, the sailors, all those who continue to fight and defend our shores and our national assets. Now bless this food that we are to receive for the proper nourishments of our bodies. We know that many in the world have food and no appetites, but most have appetites with no food. We thank you for both. Bless now this gathering. In your name we pray. Amen.
I would now like to call to the stage Kelly Walsh, U.S. Navy retired, Director of Business Development and Outreach at the U.S. Naval Institute, to recognize a group of enlisted superior performers. Please refer to the app for the full list of award winners.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my privilege to join you here for the third time this week to honor this year's enlisted superior performers. Each year at West, the U.S. Naval Institute and AFCEA International recognize the service, capabilities, and accomplishments of sailors, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen from local area commands. The recipients will receive a one-year gratis membership to the U.S. Naval Institute and AFCEA International. These sea service professionals were selected by their leadership for their outstanding service. They represent the talent across warfare communities, enlisted occupations and specialties, and are serving globally at the tip of the spear. They are professional, educated, aware, capable, and making a difference each and every day. This afternoon, we will recognize service members from Naval Air Force U.S. Pacific Fleet, Naval Surface Force U.S. Pacific Fleet, Naval Special Warfare Command, Navy Region Southwest, Submarine Development Squadron 5, Submarine Squadron 11, and U.S. 3rd Fleet. At this point, I'd like to invite each Parent Command representative to join me on stage to formally recognize these exceptional performers. I ask that each awardee stand as your name is called and remain standing until all members of your Parent Command have been recognized, at which point I invite the audience to applaud those awardees. Command Master Chief Janine Dickens will recognize awardees from Naval Air Force U.S. Pacific Fleet.
Good afternoon, everyone. Congratulations to all the awardees across all communities, the best of the best. I'm Command Master Chief Janine Dickens from the Fleet Logistic Most High Mission Wing. And on behalf of Commander U.S. Air Force Pacific, I would like to recognize AZ-1 Arana from VRM 30, LS-2 Clyde from the USS Abraham Lincoln, AM-1 Geringer from HSM 71, AZ-1 Goins from ComNav Air Pack, IT-1 Lubers from Com HSM Wing Pack, YN-1 Randall from Com Navy Air Force Reserve, PR-1 Simeon from Com HSM Wing Pack, YN-1 Ventura from HSM Wing Pack, and AC-1 Young from the USS Abraham Lincoln. Please give them a round of applause.
Command Master Chief Matthew Logsdon will recognize awardees from Naval Surface Force U.S. Pacific Fleet.
Thank you, Kelly. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be recognizing the 8 outstanding surface warriors who represent thousands of sailors and civilian employees serving in-country, stationed abroad, and deployed in the most volatile area of the world. These incredible sailors represent the best of our nation, who are significant leaders in many different types of platforms, and they're all vital in ensuring their commands are ready for tasking when called. From Commander Destroyer Squadron 21, Operations Specialist First Class, Joe Bostic. Also, from Commander Destroyer Squadron 21, Information Systems Technician Second Class, Daniel Strahan. From Commander Littoral Combat Squadron 1, Gunner's Mate, Second Class, David Gonzalez. From USS Tripoli, Aviation Bosun's Mate Fuels, First Class, Karina Alain. From USS Boxer, Interior Communications Electrician, First Class, Joshua Aziz. From USS Essex, Hospital Corpsman, First Class, Marquis Lane. From USS Chaffee, Gas Turbine Systems Technician Mechanical, Second Class, Angel Rivera. And finally, from USS Pinckney, Bosun's Mate, Second Class, Andrea Rodriguez Lopez. Ladies and gentlemen, these are your outstanding Naval Surface Force U.S. Pacific Fleet warriors. Let's give a round of applause.
Deputy Force Master Chief Joaquin Martinez will recognize awardees from Naval Special Warfare Command.
On behalf of Rear Admiral Davids, Naval Special Warfare Command, and Deputy Force Master Chief Dittmar, I'd like to thank AFCEA Naval Institute for allowing us to recognize our awardees today. Today's awardees are representatives of our SEAL teams, SEAL Delivery Vehicle teams, Special Boat teams, Special Reconnaissance teams, and other logistics and training commands. They are all at the forefront of helping NSW's integrated deterrence efforts and maintaining our maritime domain awareness and dominance. HM2 Ashton Anthony, Naval Special Warfare Center. ND1 Nicholas Carson, Naval Special Warfare Development Group. CM1 William Crooks, Naval Special Warfare Group 1, Det Guam. IS-1 Brett Lynn, Naval Special Warfare Command. SO1 Matthew McLean, SEAL Team 8. IS-1 Charles Newton, Naval Special Warfare Mission Support Center. And lastly, SP2 Blake Shove, Special Boat Team 20. Please join me in giving a round of applause for awardees.
Command Master Chief Felissa Tisdale will recognize awardees from Navy Region Southwest.
On behalf of Rear Admiral Brad Rosen, Commander Navy Region Southwest, I introduce to you these outstanding sailors from the Navy's best region, Navy Region Southwest. NC-1 Atwell, Navy Region Southwest TPU. MA-3 Javier Batres from Navy Base San Diego. BM3 Gabriela Lopez from Naval Base Point Loma, MA1 Justin Mahanic from Navy Region Southwest staff, CS1 Charlene Maxwell from Navy Base San Diego, YN2 Rachel Moreau from Navy Region Southwest staff, MA1 Tyler Rodriguez from Naval Base Point Loma, and QM2 Krista Stewart from Navy Region Southwest TPU. Round of applause, please.
Master Chief Zachary Seedling will recognize awardees from Submarine Development Squadron 5 and Submarine Squadron 11.
Thank you for joining me today for recognizing these sailors from our nation's premier fast attack submarine squadrons and special projects detachments. Please join me in thanking and representing EMN2 Jeremil David, USS Alexandria. YNS2 Rodrion Griffith, Submarine Squadron 11. ETV-1 Amando Laura, Devron 5, Detachment Poseidon. MMN-1 Leonardo Brown, USS Alexandria. ETV-2 Zachary Lukenbach, USS Connecticut. LSS-2 Ryan Nagangi, Devron 5 staff. FT-2 Eric Nunez, USS Scranton. HM-1 Jose Pina, USS Scranton. YNS-2 Kevin Rosales, USS Seawolf. And lastly, but not least, MMA-1 Wagoner from Devron 5, Detachment Triton. Please join me in a round of applause.
Command Master Chief Trenton Schmidt will recognize awardees from U.S. 3rd Fleet.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you to the U.S. Naval Institute and AVSEA International for your continued support of the superior performing men and women serving in our Navy. It is now my distinct privilege on behalf of Vice Admiral Michael Boyle, Commander U.S. 3rd Fleet, to announce the 3rd Fleet enlisted superior performers. From Commander Carrier Strike Group 1, Operations Specialist 2nd Class, Jennifer Chavez. From Commander Carrier Strike Group 9, Personnel Specialist 1st Class, Ma Tiani. From Commander Carrier Strike Group 15, Cryptological Technician Collection 1st Class, Kiso Falatafuga. From Expeditionary Strike Group 3, Personnel Specialist 1st Class, Gerardo Tijerina. From Expeditionary Warfare Group, Training Group, Pacific, Electrician's Mate 1st Class, Christopher Wyatt. From Tactical Training Group, Pacific, Yeoman 1st Class, Brian Smith. And from U.S. 3rd Fleet Staff, Information Systems Technician, 1st Class, Charles Haley. Please join me in a round of applause.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's just have one more final round of applause for these superior performers.
Please enjoy your meal. The program will resume shortly.
Protecting what matters most is the mission that matters most. At Lockheed Martin, we know today's battlefront is behind, above, and below. So no matter where the threat comes from, we make sure you stay ahead of it. Out here, we understand that every piece of the all-domain puzzle must fit together perfectly so that you can defend our shared values and own the contested battle space. That's why we've spent decades building and connecting the platforms you need to dominate every domain across air, land, sea, space, and cyber. We've created technologies that unite disparate and complex systems so you can sense, make sense, and act, protecting in the same moment you detect. And to safeguard that advantage, we're integrating digital engineering, AI, and 5G technology into the field and within our own walls. Everything we do is in service of what you do and why you do it. Your mission is a safer, more secure world. Our promise is to help make it happen by connecting the software to the hardware to everywhere, ensuring those we serve always stay ahead of ready.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, please join me in welcoming to the stage Vice Admiral Peter Daly, U.S. Navy retired, publisher and Chief Executive Officer of the U.S. Naval Institute.
Thank you. Welcome to our Thursday keynote lunch. Hope everybody's enjoying lunch. Before we make our introduction of our keynote speaker, we thank Lockheed Martin for its sponsorship of this afternoon's keynote. And I ask Mr. Chauncey McIntosh to come up and join me on stage from Lockheed Martin, Vice President and General Manager of Integrated Warfare Systems and Sensors at Lockheed Martin, to say a few words. Over to you, Chauncey.
So good afternoon, and welcome to the keynote launching featuring Admiral Michael M. Gilday, United States Navy at this year's West 2023. As the Admiral stated, I am Chauncey McIntosh, Vice President and General Manager of our Integrated Warfare Systems and Sensors business at Lockheed Martin, and a very proud sponsor of this year's West. We first want to thank ASEA International, as well as the U.S. Naval Institute, for hosting this year's event. I am so honored to be here and personally to engage with our sailors, our Marines, our Coast Guardmen, and to understand what challenges they face and what they're up against in today's environment. Forums like these are so integral to nurturing our relationships, gaining valuable feedback on how our systems and our capabilities and the support teams how are they performing to assist the frontline operators and to help you meet and outpace today's threats. We are proactively looking at ways to help bring speed to our capabilities. We hear the call loud and clear to deliver faster capability without sacrificing quality. Recently, we had the honor of hosting Admiral Gilday at our facility in Morristown, New Jersey. Sir, what I'll say is that your interests in our work showed our team how important what they're doing and their contributions to not only the United States Navy, but our great country. And our employees take great pride in supporting not only the Navy, the Marine Corps, and our Coast Guard in their mission. We are committed to developing innovative technologies to support the future of missile defense, radar, and combat systems integration to keep the Navy ahead of ready. So Admiral, I'll say thank you. Your visit clearly energized our team. And with that, I'll turn it back to Admiral Daly. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Excellent. Okay, now it's my honor to introduce our keynote speaker, 1985 U.S. Naval Academy grad. Admiral Gilday is a career surface warfare officer, served in cruisers and destroyers. He commanded at all levels, including USS Higgins, DDG-76, Benfold, DDG-65. He was the Commodore at Destroyer Squadron 7, serving as the Sea Combat Commander in the Reagan Carrier Strike Group. He was the Carrier Strike Group 8 Commander embarked aboard the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. He was the commander of U.S. Fleet Cyber and 10th Fleet, and his joint assignments include executive assistant to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, naval aide to the President of the United States. As a flag officer, he served in positions as Director of Operations for NATO's Joint Force Command Lisbon, Chief of Staff for the Naval Striking and Support Forces, NATO, Director of Operations, J3, U.S. Cyber Command, Director of Operations, J3, Joint Staff, and Director Joint Staff. Admiral Gilday took office as the 32nd Chief of Naval Operations in August 2019. Let's give our Chief of Naval Operations a warm welcome. Thank you, sir.
Huh? You got the music
Welcome.
playing for me?
You got the walk?
Huh? Glad you guys found my music. Admiral Daly, General Lawrence, thank you very much for hosting, and for the hundreds of invisible hands that work for both of you that have made this happen. A round of applause for them, please. to our enlisted superior performers, congratulations. Thanks for setting the standard. Stay amazing. I'd like to also recognize our international partners who are here today from at least 15 different nations. If you could please stand. And finally, if we have our NRJOTC cadets here with us at the luncheon, would they please stand? Are they here? Maybe they're here for breakfast. Anyway, I thank them as well. They are the future of our Navy. This is the 33rd year of West. And if we think back 3 decades ago, this conference, the inaugural conference, was held just months before Iraq crossed the line of departure into Kuwait, which led to the first Gulf War. We had the no-fly zone enforcement over Iraq for a number of years. We had Kosovo, Bosnia, Croatia, Somalia. We were involved in Haiti with humanitarian assistance operations. It was 9/11, Afghanistan. There was Iraq. We were involved in counter-piracy, counter-drug, counter-trafficking, and now a resurgent Russia and the pacing threat of the PRC. And so the past 30 years, for most of that time frame, has been a distinct post-Cold War period. But things are different now. The strategic environment has fundamentally changed, and we too must change with it. So what I thought I'd do today for a few minutes before engaging in discussion with you all is to speak a little bit about the theme of this conference, which has been readiness, modernization, and capacity. And it really has been focused on the future. But what I'd like to try and do is draw a thread that carries through the next 30 years in terms of where we are and where we think we're going. If there's any silver lining to the pacing threat that is the PRC, it's always good to have somebody breathing down your neck. It puts pressure on you, right? It gives you focus, real focus. It keeps you sighted on the things that we need to invest in. First and foremost, our people. But it really does focus it in a serious kind of way. And I think that message was loud and clear through each of the forums, each of the panels that we've had over the past few days. The new strategic environment, as the title of the slide behind me indicates, is not just about adaptation, because that past 30 years that I described, we adapted, and some of that turned out well, and some of that did not turn out well as a joint force. But now we have to leverage adaptation in the near term to affect change. For a very capital-intensive service like the Navy, revolutionary change is really hard. And we've learned sometimes the hard way. When we move too fast, we make big mistakes. And so our path really has been more evolutionary. It's been more deliberate, but it has been focused. When I think about the navigation plan that kind of guides our way in terms of what we need to be sighted on, what we need to invest our money in to provide our sailors with the best capabilities possible, we talk about 6 trends. I'll call them 6 trends or 6 attributes. And I was struck a number of years ago by reading an article in Proceedings by a naval officer named Trip Barber, who for years was involved in assessments in the Navy staff. And he was really legendary in terms of the way that he could take a very analytical look at what we were making our investments in. And Tripp talked about a number of themes that should drive where we take our Navy. And I essentially, I didn't adopt everything that Tripp talked about, but it did inform some of the conclusions that I drew in my mind. and that the investments that we make, not just to deliver a hybrid fleet in the early 2040s, but in order to adapt today to a pacing threat that is evolving very quickly, those attributes are distance, and so that means long-range fires. It's deception, it's concealment, it's stealth, it's maneuverability. That's very, very important. It's defense and thinking about ways to defend our fleet that we haven't before, leveraging technologies like high-powered microwave or directed energy. It's about distribution. It's about coming at an adversary not by massing forces, but by spreading those forces out, not just in the physical domain, but in all domains from seabed to space, in the virtual and in the physical. It's about delivery. That's contested logistics. In order to fight with a distributed force, that distributed force has to be resupplied. It has to be repaired. It has to be sustained. And so we're thinking differently about how we do that, not just with a hybrid fleet of manned and unmanned, but how we do that today. And the last attribute that I would mention would be decision advantage. So you can have all that stuff, but at the end of the day, you have to be able to decide and to act faster than your opponent. And so in projects that we have today, like Project Overmatch, which is the Navy's contribution to JADC2, we're focused on that. That sets a foundation, we think, for the Joint Force in order to communicate and command and control in ways that we've never conceived before. So the point that I'm making is this 3-year to 30-year broad future that we're looking at. We are trying with a high degree of consistency to stay true to what we really need to stay true to in order to deliver every single day to field the most capable, lethal, ready force that we can. I'm reminded of an Air Force colonel. Any Air Force folks in the room today, or prior Air Force? There you go. Colonel John Boyd. Most people think about Colonel John Boyd and they think about the OODA loop, or they think about his energy maneuverability theory that so influenced the design of the F-15 and the F-16. But Boyd talked about 3 key priorities. And those priorities were people, ideas, and then things in that order. People, ideas, and things. And so I just want to spend 5 or 10 minutes kind of drawing that thread out in terms of what we're doing as a Navy, taking a look at today and into the future, leveraging adaptation today to affect longer range change. In terms of people, we just recognized some phenomenal sailors. And I believe that people and not things are our primary competitive advantage in this competition with the PRC. The Secretary of the Navy spoke about it this morning when he talked about his budget priorities, and he talked about education, and he talked about how important that is because it's tied to you. It's tied to you. You know, we can have the best things in the world, but at the end of the day, it's the operators who put their fingers on those buttons. It's those SEALs in the water. It's those aviators in the air that are really going to make a difference. I think that the sailors in our Navy are world class in operational execution. When I was the J3 in the Joint Staff, I watched a largely maritime-driven, synchronized attack on Libyan chemical weapons facilities. It was carried out not just from the Eastern Mediterranean, but from the Red Sea, and simultaneously from the Northern Arabian Sea by one commander, primarily maritime. It was such a thing to watch. It was such a thing to behold, and that really spoke to me in terms of a naval officer, in terms of what we're capable of. Day-to-day operational execution by the United States Navy, by the EOD teams that today are just wrapping up their work off the coast of South Carolina, recovering, metric tons of material from the bottom of the ocean after that balloon splashed, but it's happening all over the world every day. The carrier Bush in the Mediterranean right now, keeping an eye on Russia. The Herschel Woody Lewis is off the coast of Turkey, providing humanitarian aid after that earthquake. We have ships in the high north. We have ships in the Western Pacific. We have information warfare operators on keyboards that are doing magnificent work. We're the only service, along with the Marine Corps, that certifies all of our forces for combat before you deploy. We're very proud of that. And we continue to make that certification process more and more challenging. The United States Navy and the United States Marine Corps are in contact with peer competitors every single day. In the North Arabian Sea, against the Iranians. In the Western Pacific, in the air and on the sea, against the PRC. In the Eastern Mediterranean and the high north, against the Russians. Counter-narcotics work in the Southern Command AOR, every single day. But to keep our advantage, we need to adapt, and we need to adapt faster. So in terms of recruiting, and you've seen some of this, we turn to the virtual. We turn to social media, a number of different platforms. And we removed ourselves from TV. And then we found out that adaptation created a gap. And that gap is that we weren't connecting to influencers, school administrators, parents. We were connecting on social media with the demographic that we wanted to recruit, but we weren't touching base with all of those people that influence those folks that we wanted to recruit. And so we adapted. We adapted in the media space, I think, and we also tried to adapt in the social media space. The idea of get real, get better is something that is more than just a bumper sticker. Get real, get better is an effort by all of us to be better at self-assessing and self-correcting so that we stay ahead of problems instead of lagging them. So that for all the good work that I just described that we're doing around the globe every day, that we don't stumble with fuel spills at Red Hill or a fire aboard a ship like the Bonhomme Richard or other accidents that we've had that were completely avoidable. So we're asking you to take a round turn on how you think about what you do every single day. And this gets back to really that people are our asymmetric advantage. In terms of how we assign people now and into the future, the detailing marketplace is a powerful tool. It gives all of you much more say in what you're going to do next, where you're going to serve, what you're going to do. And over time, from the apprenticeship to the journeyman to the supervisory level, it gives you more leverage, more autonomy, and helping forge your career in a very powerful way along with your family to make you more competitive, to ensure that your family is being looked after, whether it's geostability or time to have a child. But it gives you more say in terms of how we manage this precious talent that we have. And I think that that's adaptation that eventually will affect big change. In terms of ideas, the ideas are really driven, at least in the fleet right now, centered around distributed maritime operations. And so that was an idea that was born a number of years ago. This was after we made that big shift a couple of administrations ago from we made a shift to the Pacific, to have a 60-40 mix of assets in the Pacific relative to the rest of the globe. And so, that led us to think about, as a Navy, how we would potentially fight an adversary in a distributed manner, as I described earlier, across all domains, physical and virtual, but to create complex problems for any potential adversary. So that idea of distributed maritime operations, under which the Marine Corps' Expeditionary Advanced Basing Operations and their littoral operations concepts are nested as they support the fleet in sea control and in power projection. And then lastly, when we think about things, and I think about that 30-year continuum, when I look at what we're investing in now under the sea with Virginia Block 4 and Block 5 submarines with progressively more lethal and capable torpedoes, putting an extra-large underwater unmanned vehicle under the water in the Western Pacific this year with 4 more to follow, with a clandestine mine-laying capability. Those are adaptations to a changing threat in the undersea that are going to lead us to change. Change in terms of how we do manned and unmanned teaming under the sea. On the surface, investments in not just Flight 2 Alpha DDGs, but Flight 3 DDGs. Maritime Strike Tomahawk. We're building a new frigate up in Wisconsin. First one will hit the water in 2026. Longer range weapons, SM-6. Weapons with range and lethality. When you think about the air, what we're doing right now with F-35s and Super Hornets in terms of fourth and fifth generation fighter integration in our carrier air wings, learning things that we never dreamed of in terms of how to bring to life even more lethal capabilities out of our Super Hornets, teamed with those F-35s. MQ-25, right? That is the unmanned refueling drone that we have that'll go IOC in 2025. That'll increase the lethal range of our carrier air wings at sea by 500 miles. That'll be able to take and return 3 strike fighters. Instead of doing refueling missions, they'll now be doing what we built them for. They'll be delivering weapons. They'll be delivering ordnance. That MQ-25 on our carriers is paving the way for the naval aviation wing of the future. That'll include manned and unmanned teaming at a ratio in the 2030s and early 2040s of probably 60% unmanned to 40% manned. MQ-25 is blazing the way. On the surface, I talked a little bit about, actually I didn't talk about unmanned at all, but we're getting to the point probably within the next 4 or 5 years where we'll begin to deploy unmanned platforms with carrier strike groups and ARGs. And the idea is that we need more ships. We need to distribute ourselves across the Pacific Ocean and across the globe. And we can do that faster and we think more effectively by having a combination of manned and unmanned with a future fleet that instead of a 60-40 mix of unmanned manned with the air, we would have a mix of 40 to 60% on the surface. So 40% would be unmanned and 60% would be manned. Think about missile trucks. Think about medium unmanned vessels that have C2 capabilities, that have EW capabilities, that could perhaps even have cyber capabilities. That kind of work is happening now. When you think about, Secretary of the Navy this morning talked about Task Force 59 and Fifth Fleet, where based on the current national defense strategy, that part of the world is a lower priority than the PRC and Russia. And so we began taking unmanned and we began taking AI capabilities and we began putting them against a real-world problem. And that real-world problem was maritime domain awareness. How do we understand what's moving on the surface of the ocean? If it's illegal arms or people that are being trafficked from Iran to Yemen, if it's weapons that are going into the Red Sea, we can't see that unless we have some type of sensor coverage. So it's leveraging unmanned and then taking that information from those unmanned platforms and pushing that to operation centers, not just in Bahrain, but in other countries in the Middle East. We have 6 countries now that are invested in this effort, where we'll have 100 unmanned platforms patrolling the Red Sea, the Arabian Gulf, and the Gulf of Aden by July of this year. And that information gets fed back to a common, what we call a single pane of glass, that allows us, through AI, to get a better understanding of what's moving on the ocean. We're going to take that same idea and we're going to scale it to other fleets. And that's going to be happening relatively soon. And there's 2 really powerful things here when we think about adaptation, we think about learning, we think about change with respect to that effort in the Middle East. One is how to command and control these unmanned platforms at scale. People talk about the Internet of Things. This is the ocean of things that we're going to have to manage, and we're going to have to manage very effectively. And again, it's not just automation. This is manned and unmanned teaming. We're going to have manned platforms out there as well, whether they're under the sea, on the sea, and in the air. And we're going to have to bring that orchestra together. Changes that we're making in our personnel system to have a new rating that actually to have specialists in this area of unmanned and robotics. Well, I guess I've covered those areas probably enough. One of the things that I think is really important here, and I think that our industry partners in the room realize, is that besides building all of these big things, the defense industrial base, if we think about it on a continuum, on the right side of that continuum are those big companies that build ships and they build aircraft, they build submarines, and they build weapons. On the left-hand side of that continuum are all of those smaller companies, those companies that are cranking out new unmanned platforms, they're cranking out AI capabilities, and that change happens really fast. And most of the time, those capabilities are designed for some type of commercial application, maybe for oil rigs down in the Gulf of Mexico. But we're taking those and we're repurposing them to a wartime mission, to a combat mission. And so we're taking capability that's already been essentially perfected, right? The technical risk in making that shift from commercial to military is very low. And so there's the opportunity there to go from prototyping to low-rate production in a much shorter period of time. When we design and build a new ship, from the time we first put pencil to paper and then finally deliver a ship, it's over a decade, easily. With this type of technology, we can move much quicker than that. In the course of a year, we can have that capability. The stuff we've been doing in Fifth Fleet is testimony. In a year and a half, we've gone from nothing to 100 unmanned platforms. And so this iterative process that we have, the investments that we're making today, Secretary Del Toro talked about the enormous support that we have from the Congress right now. Our defense budget has risen significantly, but the investment in the United States Navy and the United States Marine Corps has come up significantly, and it needs to. For the last 20 years, the nation has been focused on ground wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And during that time, strategic investments in the Navy, understandably, have taken a back seat. No more. No more. And so there is consensus on Capitol Hill that the Navy needs to be bigger, it needs to be stronger, it needs to be better networked, it needs to be more capable, it needs to be more lethal. So there are investments, they have been very, very supportive of our investment priorities, which has been first and foremost readiness, secondly, modernizing the fleet that we have, and last is capacity. Because many have heard me say this before, my view is that we can't have a Navy larger than one that we can sustain. If we do, if we're focused too much on numbers, on just the size of the fleet, we're going to pay for that with weapons out of magazines. We're going to pay for it with more gaps at sea. We're going to pay for it with less parts in supply storerooms. And so that focus on readiness is fundamentally important, I think. Why? It gets back to that friction point that the title of this, the theme of this conference gets at, right? It's that tug of war between current readiness and a future fleet, and where you're going to put your next dollar. We have to make investments in both, and that's why this path over a course of 3 decades in the underwater, in the undersea, on the sea, in the air, information warfare, why it's so important to have consistency across those 6, informed by those 6 Ds that I talked about, so that we don't take our eye off the ball. So, with that, hopefully I tied together things from some of the other speakers, and I'd be happy to take any of your questions. Yes, sir.
Admiral Paul Rospold from Systems Planning and Analysis. Good to see you after a number of decades.
Good to see you.
Truth in advertising here. The aforementioned Trip Barber and I have been helping N96 and N4 with some of these hard problems. And I'd like to ask you about two programs or two initiatives in Surface Navy and just get your thoughts. Where do you think we're going with DDGX and Future Integrated Combat System?
And what's the second one?
Future Integrated Combat System.
Okay. Let me take the second one first. In terms of integrated combat system, full speed ahead. So I've been to Forge up in Maryland. I've seen what we're doing there in terms of a DevOps environment that really ties together, integrates all of our weapon systems together, and allows us to update those systems in a way that's significantly better than the way we do it now. A software change today can take up to 6 years to get to the fleet. A hardware change can take up to 8. Where we're moving through an integrated combat system is to put us in a place where we can do a software change within 3 months and a hardware change within 6. That's where we need to be. In fact, we need to do better than that. That's a good initial aim point. But this is more than just aspirational. We'll actually be delivering that capability to the fleet. It's pretty exciting. On the first question, again, was about?
DDGX.
DDGX. So we're at the point right now where our first Flight 3 DDG is going on Bravo trials this month. What a capability. What I'd like to do is to make sure that that Flight 3 line, that production line, in both Bath Iron Works and HII Pascagoula, HII Ingalls, is humming. And we are pumping out these ships on time, within budget, and that line is mature before we transition to DDGX. We're designing DDGX now. We've learned from the past with other ship classes that we produce the best ships in this country when the Navy has the lead and industry is in partner with us. So that's what we're doing right now. The Navy naval architects have the lead. The shipbuilders are working with us. We're designing that ship. In terms of ballpark, when we do the transition, it's not yet defined, but it's probably in the 2032 timeframe. Again, Flight 3 is a great ship. Let's pump them out. Let's pump them out in numbers. Let's get to 3 a year before we run too fast. I talked a little bit earlier about, running too fast with scissors, and, we've learned from that. Let's be deliberate. Let's not have our eyes become bigger than our stomach and get too far ahead of ourselves.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Radio check. Good afternoon, sir. Gunnery Sergeant Owen, U.S. Marine Corps. Thank you for being here.
Good to be here.
With regards to the Marine Corps and the EABO stand-in forces concept in the littorals, how do you see us tackling expeditionary logistics with the possibility of completely broken supply chains due to possible attacks similar to those seen in the Second Nagorno-Karabakh War?
Yeah, so the Commandant talks about this, right? So LMS is a part of that, is a part of the answer to that. For those that haven't heard about LMS, LMS is the new concept for what was LAW, or the Light Amphibious Warship. And so the idea is to be able to move Marines around quickly in the archipelago, to put in a place where they can deliver effects very quickly, and then to move them again. It's going to be sporty. And I think the Commandant describes it like that. There is no perfect answer. I go back to, you're not going to be satisfied with this answer, but I go back to the people piece of this. That's going to be fundamental in terms of how we're going to get innovative and creative. There are certainly going to be concepts, warfighting concepts, that are going to underpin the sustainment of the littoral maritime regiments out there on those islands. But I think fundamentally it's going to come down to Marines like you, Gunnery Sergeant, to figure this out while they're out there, because it's not going to be textbook. It's going to be ugly, it's going to be fast, and you're going to have to think better than the other guy.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Admiral Bill Hamlet from the Naval Institute Proceedings.
Sir.
Some major themes that have been in proceedings and also here at West: speed to fleet, distributed lethality, partnership, commonality, interoperability, shipbuilding capacity. One idea that keeps coming up in some discussion groups with the Naval Institute is that that would seem to scratch some of those itches, at least, if not all of them, is for the Navy to take advantage of the hot production lines that the Coast Guard has running with National Security Cutter, Offshore Patrol Cutter, Fast Response Cutter. My question is, if the Marines can put Naval Strike Missile on a JLTV, would it make sense for the Navy to buy an upgun, put NSMs on some of those cutters that are already coming off the production lines for the Coast Guard?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I think the answer is right now is nothing's off the table. And so the recent NDAA gave the Commandant of the Marine Corps the lead in deciding amphibious requirements. And so I don't want to speak for him. We do have an awesome partnership, and that will continue. But he's the one that, in the end, decides requirements. Right now, I know that the Marine Corps, in collaboration with the Navy, is looking at a number of different platforms, and will be testing a number of different platforms. Your point about using an existing hull in order to accelerate, from the production line to the fleet is well taken. And I think that there's a lot of interest. I think that speed has to be a variable that factors in an important way as we determine which one of those hulls we're going to sink our money in.
Good afternoon, sir. Captain Lau, Marine Corps. Given the multitude of new technologies coming out, it seems somewhat similar to when the battleship was replaced by the carrier as the core of the fleet. Do you see any of these new technologies threatening to replace our carriers as the core of the fleet?
Not at this time. So there's a lot of things that we do. One of the D's I talked about was deception. One of the really important attributes of our carrier force, of our Navy and Marine Corps, is the fact that we're highly maneuverable. So if National Airport in Washington were an aircraft carrier, tomorrow at this time, it could be off the coast of Nova Scotia, or it could be off the coast of the Florida Keys, or if it could go west, it'd be west of the Missouri River, or west of the Mississippi River in Missouri. And so we're highly mobile. We also leverage some classified capabilities to help us better conceal where we're moving. But that is becoming increasingly more difficult, right? And distributed maritime operations really talks about how we pulse in and how we pulse out of the weapons engagement zone. Part of this, part of the ability to do that rests on counter C5 ISRT. And so, in other words, giving us the ability to poke the adversary in the eye to give us the time, particularly in the fog and friction early in a fight, to put ourselves in a position of advantage. Again, with weapons with longer range, right, more capable, with air wings that have longer range and more capability. Let me just mention something about ARGs real quick, because I don't think we've talked about them enough at this conference. But when you think about, we tend to talk about the PRC, and we tend to talk about things through the lens of an attack on Taiwan, because PRC is the pacing threat, and Taiwan is the most difficult scenario under the pacing threat. But there's a lot of things that naval forces do across the spectrum of conflict that you can't ignore. So the far right is a hot war. But there's a lot of stuff, and you all know because you've been to sea, or most of you have been to sea, you all know the stuff we're doing day in and day out with allies and partners. You look at the investments in our big deck amphibs as an example, 53-kilo helicopters, MV-22s, F-35B, right? Weapons at range and speed, and a bunch of angry Marines. That's a pretty good option for a combatant commander out there in terms of how he wants to use the amphibious force left of that red-hot battle, right, in order to perhaps deter an adversary from doing something, in order to hold a slock open so we can continue to move commerce through a slock, let's say in the Middle East, like the Bab el-Mandeb of the Red Sea. So I think that there's great promise in the future of the ARG-MU in terms of what we're going to do. I think, again, we have to be really creative, and we have to continue to talk about all the different things that the United States Navy and the United States Marine Corps bring to bear. And we're an instrument of national policy that doesn't operate solely in the military lane. But historically, we've also operated in the diplomatic, and we've also operated in the economic, and have had great effect there. It's why, in fact, the economic is why we have a Navy, right, and a Marine Corps, so that the prosperity of this country can continue. Thanks for the question.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, Admiral.
Are we out of time?
We know each other. It's only going to be very short. We had a great discussion last night, and I'd like to follow through with that in a positive way to end this conference.
There's more?
It's positive.
All right.
We spoke this morning to the Secretary of the Navy in regards to enlistees, applications, and so forth. And if those secretaries can all do their jobs, then you will have, and the other armed services will have enough enlistees to move forward. And I understand your concern and problem with manning ships. I also understand that you temporarily had to take and reduce your qualifications to man those ships. So I want to leave this on a positive note by saying that I believe that if the Navy and the other armed services go out into the hinterland of the United States, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, Kansas, Nebraska, Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho, and get out there and put a word out that there are plenty of youth in this country that will flock to the area of going into the armed services. But the secretaries are going to have to do something about that, those obstacles that now are there. So I want to leave that with a positive. Thank you.
Yeah, let me address one thing that you mentioned in terms of qualifications. So one of the things that we've done in the Navy is we've taken a look at, so any service member that joins is they're going to take the Armed Forces Qualification Test. And that's a test that actually looks at your aptitude to serve in the military, right? And so on a scale of 0 or 1 to 100, you get a score. And typically, we have not been accepting candidates that have been in the 0 to 30 percentile, okay? We decided to open it up and take a look at them. Why? Because in order to be a sailor in the Navy, you still have to have an ASVAB score high enough in order to put you in a rating, right? And so even if you scored a 40 on the AFQT, but you didn't score well enough in the ASVAB, we couldn't take you in the Navy. So what we try to do here is open up that, to give us more candidates. The other thing that as somebody who didn't get into the college I wanted to go to the first time, primarily because of test scores. Tests don't measure somebody's passion, somebody's desire. You talked a little bit about this morning with the physical challenges that you had, and you plowed right through them. A test can't measure that. So having an understanding of somebody that really wants to join, and I'm telling you, we are considering waivers on a case-by-case basis in a number of areas, including medical. We're trying to take a much more personalized approach to every single candidate because we are competing against each other and competing against industry for that talent pool.
And I am sure that those recruiters for the sailors, the Navy, can go out there and harvest that land, and we can have a really robust enlistments for all the armed services. And thank you very much, Admiral.
Thank you very much.
Admiral Gilday, Brent Sadler, the Heritage Foundation. Thank you for your time again.
Good to see you.
My question, you mentioned empty VLS cells or empty armories if you don't grow the fleet in a smart, mature way. But the question that I've got is, what we're seeing right now in Ukraine is that we don't have the industrial base, the production, to keep up with use.
Yep.
Notably, that's in artillery rounds, but it could be a lot worse if a war happens in the Pacific. I was wondering if you could spend a little bit of time talking about your thoughts on making sure that we do have that capacity to fill up our armories when we do get into a fight in the Pacific.
Yeah, thanks. So a few years ago, as we shifted our priorities to readiness, modernization, and capacity in that order, I spoke a little bit about this earlier, but supply parts and munitions. So we essentially use those as trade space in order to pay for platforms. We're no longer doing that. And so even in the unfunded list, an unfunded list is something that we present to Congress every year because stuff that we feel that we need didn't make it into the budget. If you take a look at our unfunded list for last year, most of that is weapons and spare parts. And what we're trying to do with respect to weapons is to maximize the output of our munitions companies, but to give them, at the same time, to give them a clearer set of headlights on what our demand signal is so that they can make investments in their infrastructure, in their workforce with a high degree of confidence that we're going to want to keep those production lines going. This morning there was a question about opening up those high-end weapons in larger numbers to our allies and partners. I think that was a very important comment, and that's also something we're looking at, as well as buying weapons, doing block buys, multi-year procurements, bundling like we do when we buy ships to get them at a better price.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Unfortunately, that was our last question. Please join me in welcoming Admiral Daly back to the stage.
Okay, so that was great. We appreciate the way that you gave us not just an update on what the Navy's doing, but connected it to the last couple days, which have been very productive. And we know your time is precious. Want to give you a copy of Mastering the Art of Command by Trent Hone. Talks about how Nimitz organized and chose talent in the Pacific to win in World War II. Has an FCA bookmark, but we thank you and appreciate your time very much.
Thanks, Reed. Could I say one more thing to the, thank you, and thanks for the time this afternoon. For the Flag Wardroom who are here today, before you leave, if you haven't met with any of our industry partners, I would urge you to do so. They'll be waiting outside. If you haven't spent any time with them, it's worth half a cup of coffee at least. So please seek the opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thanks.
So, for those of you who have your phone out or your calendar, 13 to 15 February 2024, West 2024, be there. And we want to thank all our participants, the level of engagement, again, on the floor, in the panels, in the keynotes has been exceptional, and we truly appreciate it. I want to thank our sponsors, without whom we could not do these events. And I would like to also say how much we appreciate at FC International and the Naval Institute the interaction and the productive discussions that we have here. We all learn a lot. I would also like to recognize, CNO mentioned the hidden hands. I'd like to thank the members of the FCA staff and the Naval Institute staff who worked so hard to make this look easy. Let's give them a hand. Thank you. This concludes the program. Enjoy.